Well, I'm back. Hello everyone, Maoist98 here with a brand new video, and today's video will be another response, but this time to a YouTuber named ZoomerNation. Now, I have known ZoomerNation for a while, and I am subscribed to her channel. I have been so for a couple of months now, and she had uploaded a video on Maoism, and like with Finbol, I must correct her incorrect understandings on the subject. So, let us dive right in. Now, she is correct right off the bat in saying that MLM was not formalized by Mao, but mainly after his death, as it was synthesized in the early 80s by the Peruvian Communist Party under the leadership of Comrade Gonzalo. However, Zimmer begins to trip up when they talk about New Democracy. Now, New Democracy, which is part of both Mao Zedong thought and Maoism, and at first, she sounds like she has a basic understanding of it, as she does put that New Democracy is a stage where the national bourgeois, under the heel of the proletariat, helps move the superstructure of society from a feudal one to a capitalist one, and then a capitalist one to a socialist one. Where she messes up is on the idea that these stages we work for are somehow antithetical to the Marxist theory, which is utter nonsense. While she makes a point from an anarchistic perspective that these stages won't lead to a moneyless, stateless society, she shows her misunderstanding of Marx and Engels' stages of human development. Human development, from the objective perspective of dialectical materialism, is that the stages of human development are influenced by the means of production. Humanity, in its infancy, started off as a primitive communal society under matriarchal rule. We lived as hunter-gatherers and in packs to ensure our survival. When agriculture came around, the society began to become more patriarchal due to the men having more control of the means of production. Given the fact that communal living was no longer needed due to the abandonment of the hunter-gatherer lifestyle, humanity had entered a new epoch. This became known as the Slave Society. The Slave Society used slaves to reap from their labor. The amount of slaves you had owned determined your power, and the more power you had over the means of production, the more you were influential. This is where classes began to form within society. Over time, the slave society began to fall out of favor due to it being inefficient. It saw decline, and a new mode of production had risen from its ashes, which we call feudalism. Feudalism had much more class division, as you had emperors, kings and queens, dukes, counts, barons, and mayors, and at the bottom you had serfs and peasants, with the latter being free to move from fief to fief. The serfs were like slaves, except they were not bought or sold, they just tenanted the manor of the landlord, and artisans, like today, could be considered petty bourgeois, as they still had their own means of production, but due to it being commodified and privately owned, it was a source for capital. Over time, with the machinery being on the rise and producing things in bulk, things became more cheaper, which grew the middle class and saw the decline of peasantry and serfdom for the most part. The structure again started to transfer from feudalism to capitalism. With this, we see a change of the way of living, and things are starting to get better for the people involved. Now, why did I take such a long time just to get to a point? Well, it's to show you that society goes through stages. You can't have a slave society, then jump straight towards a capitalist one, or go from a primitive society and jump straight forward to a socialist one while skipping the slave society, feudal society, and capitalist society. It ignores the material conditions and material reality. This is why Mao formulated New Democracy, as it is a universal principle of how class changes. This is why stuff such as the NEP happened. You can't have a feudal society go straight to a moneyless one. This is impossible. It can create new issues. So this whole prefiguration idea of the NEP or New Democracy being antithetical to Maoism is just pure and utter nonsense. Now, the other argument that will be followed up is how do we make sure the capitalist won't come back? Well, I feel like I say this in every video. Cultural Revolution, where the USSR failed, China knew that culture had to change, but not peacefully, but by force. Society is a dialectic. There will always be a struggle between two lines. There will always be a reactionary line versus a revolutionary one. And the only way for the revolutionary one to win over the reactionary one through struggle, via critique, purge, or a cultural revolution. I say all of this due to our next point being why would we risk relying on capitalists to help bring us forward from a semi-feudal one to a capitalist society. Yes, there were risks when the time came for collectivization, Many petite bourgeois and other owners of capital were not peaceful. Some of them even burned their own grain and hoarded it, such as the issue in Ukraine. Others tried to fight back but ultimately lost due to the people's will being influenced by the party. You see, when Marxism is propagated in society, many people will tend to fight for it. This is how propaganda works. Why do you think so many people today fight for keeping wages low, not wanting good health care, and other anti scientific policies? It is because the propaganda of capital influences them to do so. Yes, this is all violent and could lead to death, but there hasn't been one single society where a peaceful way has proven to work. These policies were never antithetical. They are always based, and always have been based, on the dialectical materialist outlook of reality. We could even argue that going through the phases, both the USSR and China had seen prosperity under capital during the transformation from a semi-feudal society to a capitalist one. Indeed, life got better for women and other minorities during this transition, but this was not the end goal, and over time they managed to reach socialism. To say this is antithetical is like saying getting a vaccine is antithetical. Yes, within the vaccine, parts of the virus are in it, but when the time comes and the virus appears, the immune system is now ready to purge your body of that disease and move forward. Even later in the video, she tries to make the argument that even following the law of human development, we in turn are only benefiting the few and not the collective, but I'll tackle that later. Now, the next point she had made is, well, she believes that Mao was a tailor. And let me tell you, if Mao Zedong was a tailor, he would not have formulated the idea of new democracy, nor would he follow Lenin, or if he so did, he would become a revisionist, which I know so many hosers would jump to in a heartbeat. Instead, he would probably become a Trotskyist or an anarchist of some sorts, which he would then lack principles and stoop so low to be the so called tailor Zoomer claims him to be. So, her next issue is that the idea of the working class looking over the national bourgeois is asinine. Well, I guess if you are still new to Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, the idea does sound idealistic. The party and the vanguard are the feet of the working class, and the bourgeois is their footstool. The vanguard is made up of a group of revolutionaries that lead the masses. These are the people that watched over the national bourgeois. The next question that can be posed is how do we make sure they don't go corrupt? That is why there is two-line struggle. There must be a struggle and a critique of mistakes, and if these mistakes keep happening from the same people, even though corrected, then it is no longer a mistake, but a purposeful revisionist tactic, which then the person should be purged. Within the same point, she goes over on to say how Lenin argued for the shattering of the state. Now, she gets this argumentation from my favorite book by Lenin, State and Revolution, which I did do a video on, link in the description, by saying that Lenin stated for the state to be shattered so that no class can longer be dominated, or something along those lines. What she misunderstands is that Lenin says things such as the withering away of the state is a process of which the working class maintains power over the bourgeois, and when the bourgeois is squashed out, there thus remains the withering away of the state and the working class within it. Over time, due to the means of production now being owned by the people, there is no need for certain apparatus to exist anymore. Thus, the notion of the state becomes obsolete. Lenin didn't say that we should shatter the state as fast as possible. To think he would advocate for such idea is silly. Lenin knew about the stages of human development and would have agreed with Mao on his view of new democracy. As for countries that are semi-feudal, need to accumulate the resources to get to socialism, but they can't without getting to capital. To shatter the state right away ignores the material world. With the immediate smashing of the state, we will not have time to resolve the cultural issues, reactionary threat, and face a possible new threat of new states rising. So again, none of this is antithetical, it is just a logical step-by-step process. Next is the idea of wage labor being bad, and for the most part it is, and this is why I am so fucking glad I am reading Poverty of Philosophy by Karl Marx. Okay, so when transitioning from society to the next, there will obviously be still the issue of currency. Now we know the basic law of the commodity being worth the amount of the work that is put in it. Money, whilst being socially constructed, is only there to represent the amount of what is owed to the worker whom produced the commodity. The transition from fiat currency will most likely be in vouchers, But before the vouchers can be introduced, whilst the capitalist mode of production still needs money, the socialist mode of production will transition over to labor vouchers, based on the work put into said product. I'm still learning about the economics half of Marxism, so this is as far I will speak on the subject. I do think I make the error of no investigation or right to speak, but then again, I am still reading The Poverty of Philosophy, and this is how much I know right now. So yeah, so if I screwed up on anything, please critique me in the comment section down below. Okay, one other thing that she says that mystifies me is the notion of the proletarian government not representing the people and being exclusionary. Well, of course it will be exclusionary, as the government works to what benefits the workers and not the bourgeois. So, people with petite bourgeois, gros bourgeois, reactionary, and anything counter to Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, principally Maoism, is to be excluded and struggled with. Certainly, within the anarchist ranks, they would not allow just anyone to join said faction without a process of a background check or, a vetting process like on Discord, in order to protect the interests of the party, which in turn is in the interest for the people. We cannot let just anyone join. As a matter of fact, that's one of the many reasons why the Black Panther Party fell. As for the government, the interest does represent the people, but not in the same as the bourgeois sense. Within the society of workers, the main focus is to benefit the proletariat with the means of production, so switching over the power of the workers and the state. So when private companies are abolished, their wealth will be collectivized and redistributed. With a well-planned economy, there will be more focus on pragmatic options, such as advancing people's living standards, eradicating the illiteracy rate, ending homelessness, advancing healthcare, and etc. We cannot have this without a proper governmental structure. Decentralization is to make sure the plans are carried out properly. Now, where there'll be decentralization. Yes, there will be decentralized autonomous regions and later a decentralized government, but that will happen over time through a series of reforms and cultural revolutions, along with certain components of the state no longer being needed as certain parts, being obsolete. Okay, next she talks about the mass line. Now she goes over how the mass line was addition to Marxism-Leninism, but she forgets to say that it is what keeps the vanguard and masses connected. Okay, so they misunderstand the mass line as being something to not trust the masses, when in reality the point of the mass line is not to only show the party they are listening, but that they, the party, are trustworthy. The party has to prove to the people they are hearing their voices. It is the party showing they can be trusted, not the other way around. One of the many reasons why the Communist Party of the Soviet Union fell to revisionism was due to the vanguard not fully listening to the issues of the people. They only represent the arm, but not the thought. And I'm sorry if you hear that in the background, it is currently raining. The mass line is not the mistrust of the people. How can it, as we are going out there and doing mass work to understand the issues they face and finding solutions to better them? The point of the mass line is to hear the people and formulate their ideas. Now, why don't we let the masses make their own decisions in terms of governing themselves? Well, as I explained before, the masses do not have the knowledge of carrying out a revolution, especially with remnants of a capitalist culture, and reactionary thought not being fully squashed out. This will lead to the portion of the masses rising up against the new system and forming a counterattack, thus leading to something akin to warring states. We don't need warlords. That's why the Communist Party must not lead but educate the masses. The working class, whilst the future of a socialist society, still rely on the Communist Party to learn how to move the world forward. The party is both the representation and the teachers of the working people. Okay, so the next point is cultural revolution. Now, I already explained why this exists and why it is needed, and I also gave another plethora of reasons in past videos. Now, dear listener, I have been typing this script whilst watching your video. So right now, I'm going to make a shot in the dark and assume they are going to go over the supposed deaths within the Cultural Revolution. And the survey says... oh shit. Well, it wasn't the first thing they brought up. Fuck. She is right in terms of the Cultural Revolution being analyzed after seeing what led to the capitalist restoration of the USSR, and that Mao came to the correct conclusion. There was internal contradictions, not external. Actually, she got that wrong. Mao never denied internal contradictions. For more information, I'll link on contradiction in the link below. And that Cultural Revolution is a crucial part of Maoism. Then she goes over the destruction of old art, old statues, which again isn't entirely bad, the purging of right-wing academics, revisionist politicians such as Deng Xiaoping and Liu Xiaoqi. Now, this is where I feel that I must point out, for the most part, the Cultural Revolution was mainly led by the Red Guards, whom themselves formed from college campuses, which I know right-wingers just get hard thinking about. But Mao never formed them, he just endorsed them. He saw them as the next generations of socialist youth. So the next mistake she makes is saying Maoism falls into revisionism due to class collaboration. Now I never thought I would hear this from an anarchist. A hojist, yes, but an anarchist? No. They get this idea from, again, New Democracy, which really does seem to be the point of the video as to what she is really against is the idea of capitalism even being introduced. I would say why this process is needed, but I have already repeated myself over and over again. No, there's a Japanese word for this. Muda muda. What I am saying is that it is futile of trying to explain due to the fact that I have already done so. But I will argue against collaboration. Now, for those of you who don't know, class collaboration, aka corporatism, is a fascistic idea that opposes both capitalism and class antagonism. On the idea that the classes should collaborate in order to maintain the society and serve the states. Needless to say, this has no basis in the material reality, and is nothing more than romanticism. The main reason dogmatists and misinterpreters of Maoism call us class collaborationist is usually due to the 4 stars on the Chinese flag, which represents the peasants, proletariat, petit bourgeois, and national bourgeois. The reason for this was how China was again constructed through each epoch. The national bourgeois are progressive when compared to the semi-feudal, and hence why they are important for transitioning to from feudalism to capitalism. They were a component of moving China forward. When China had the material conditions trans over again, they did through the Great Leap Forward, which saw an end to New Democracy. The socialists then gained the power of the country, squashing out the national bourgeois and slowly squashing out the petit bourgeois, along with the improving condition of the peasants to elevate them out of the class they were in. This isn't class collaboration due to class antagonisms are being resolved with the erasure of other classes. So this whole idea of class collab is rubbish and nothing else. Then they go back how the Cultural Revolution did destroy revisionist elements, but then destroy the core revisionist element, which again is just rubbish. Alright, the next thing she brings up is the Soviet Union's factory outlier prior to the October Revolution. Now, does this mean she is talking about the bourgeois revolution of February? I don't know, she doesn't specify. So I can't really tell you what life was exactly, but given the fact that the Bolsheviks grew in popularity and the rising contradictions between the workers and the capitalists proves that life wasn't better per se, but it was better compared to the feudal, but not as great as it could get. Not to mention they were still in the Great War, or World War I as we now know it, which many people within the Russian Empire really wanted out of. So this argument means nothing. It removes the historical context of the struggles the Russians faced during the time between the February Revolution and the pre-October Revolution. Okay, so when I finally got to the 17 mark, this is where she says that there has been socialist development in pre-capitalist society, and that we should not be dogmatic. Okay, so let's go over the first glaring mistake. Whatever quote-unquote socialist mode of workers were in would not have been in the same sense as scientific socialism. They would have run into the same issues as mentioned before and would have fallen. Marxists are not dogmatic. There is no one singular truth within Marxism. If there was, Lenin, Stalin, Mao, and Gonzalo wouldn't have built their theory of socialism. It would have been static and died out long ago. We will be nothing more than academics turning the world upside down. If it was dogmatic, Marxism wouldn't have had evolved over time, because for something to formulate over time, there has to be contradictions that must be resolved. The mistakes of Marx and Engels were corrected, the mistakes of Lenin was corrected, the mistakes of Stalin was corrected, the mistakes of Mao was corrected, and the mistakes of Gonzalo are corrected. Whatever mistakes current revolutionaries are carrying out, they are being subjected to criticism based on the scientific method of the ever-changing material conditions, so the accusation of dogmatism falls flat on its face. Okay, so that'll be it for this review. I feel like I covered everything Zoomer brought up. Their main issue is that the stages of getting to socialism relies on the bourgeois as it is a part of human stages of development. And I get this fear, I do. But it is a necessary evil. Hell, Lenin was a big fan of introducing the NEP, but he knew in order to get to socialism, they had to go through a period of capitalism. Listen, I'm not as mad at this video as I was with Finbol because Finbol, for his fucked up critique, didn't have the excuse of not being a Marxist. Zoomer does, and I know Zoomer has said before that she understands Marxism better than any Marxist, but I'll say this: I am more forgiving. Zoomer, do more research on the theory. It is more complicated than you think. Hell, even I'm still learning. Oh, well, anyway, that will do it for me today. The videos mentioned will be linked in the description down below. I am glad I took a break. I am feeling much better, and I am glad I was able to make this video. So if you liked the video, like it, dislike if you dislike it. If you have a critique, leave it down below in the comment section. Click the subscribe button if you like what I do, and make sure you hit the bell notification to know when I upload a new video. This is Maoist98, signing off.